An undercover CEO walks into his own restaurant. He's wearing a hoodie, a cap pulled low, and a question he can't shake. Everything looks fine. The food, the service, the smiles. But something feels wrong, disconnected. He sits quietly in a corner booth, pretending to browse the menu. That's when he hears it. Two teenage boys whispering behind him. Mom said it's his fault, that we lost everything because of him. He freezes. They don't know who he is, but they're here for him, and they've been waiting, not for a meal, for answers. Jonathan Reeve was the kind of man who built things from scratch, not just buildings or businesses, but belief. At 54, he was the founder and face of Reeve's Table, a high-end restaurant known for turning local ingredients into stories on a plate. Customers came for flavors, sure, but they stayed for something deeper. It felt like every dish remembered something, or someone. But lately, Jonathan couldn't shake a feeling. Everything looked fine from the outside. Reviews were still glowing. Tables were always booked, and the press still loved to call him the visionary of Old Pine District. And yet, something felt missing. It wasn't the food. It wasn't the numbers. It was the heartbeat. He couldn't remember the last time he felt truly connected to his restaurant, to the people, the story, the fire in the kitchen. So, on a rainy Tuesday evening, Jonathan made a decision. He pulled on a faded hoodie, slipped into worn jeans, and tugged a baseball cap low over his face. No camera crew, no clipboard, no announcement, just a man returning to the place that made him. The moment he stepped inside Reeve's Table, it hit him. The warmth, the smells, the sound of silverware clinking gently against porcelain, the soft laughter rising and falling like tides. He paused. No one noticed him. Perfect. He slid into a booth at the far back, close enough to feel the pulse of the room, but distant enough to observe. A young waitress approached, maybe in their early 20s. She wore a polite smile and carried herself like she'd been doing this for a while, but her eyes were kind. "Evening, sir. Can I get you started with something to drink?" "Water's fine," Jonathan said, his voice low and neutral, "and I'll need a few minutes with the menu." She nodded and walked away, her shoes whispering across the floor. He opened the menu, but he didn't read it. He already knew every dish, every flavor note. Instead, he listened, really listened. The table to his right was a couple on their anniversary. They toasted to one more year. The group behind him? Two teenage boys, 15, maybe 16. One wore a hoodie too big for him, the other a Yankees cap that hid half his face. Their voices were hushed but urgent. "Do you think we'll even see him?" The first boy whispered. "I don't know," the second boy replied. "Mom said this is the place. She said he comes here all the time." Jonathan didn't move. His breath slowed. Who were they talking about? He kept his head down, pretending to study the wine list. But now his mind was racing. The first boy fidgeted. "We're not even supposed to be here." "We won't get caught," the second one said, more sharply. "We just need to figure out who he is." Jonathan frowned. At first, he dismissed it. Teenagers are teenagers. Maybe they were looking for a celebrity. But then, "Mom said it's his fault everything went wrong," the second boy muttered. "She said if it weren't for him, we wouldn't be living like this." Jonathan's grip tightened on the menu. His hands tensed. His chest began to ache in that specific way it does when guilt starts to whisper, "Could it be me?" The waitress returned with his water. He barely noticed. "Ready to order?" she asked, upbeat. Jonathan glanced down at the menu, though he hadn't read a word. "I'll take the house special," he said, his voice distant. "Great choice," she smiled, writing it down before leaving. As soon as she disappeared, Jonathan shifted slightly in his seat, trying to catch more of the boys' conversation. "Mom said he ruined her life," the second boy murmured. "Took everything from her. Do you think he'll even care?" "I don't know," the first boy replied, "but I want to see him. I want to see the guy who made us lose everything." Jonathan couldn't breathe. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they said them, not with drama, not with hatred, but with a kind of hollow hurt that had been living with them for years. He hadn't done anything that bad, had he? Sure, he'd made tough calls over the years. Let people go, restructure teams, cut through red tape. But he'd always thought he was fair. Tough but fair. Still, something about those boys' voices rattled him. The anger, the ache. Were they talking about him? He peeked behind his shoulder just enough to see them. They looked so young. The boy in the hoodie was thin and twitchy, looking around like he expected to be kicked out any second. The other in the cap looked calmer, but his jaw was clenched. Mom said he wouldn't hide, the hoodie boy whispered. She said if he's here, we'll know. Jonathan's blood turned cold. What if they did recognize him? He didn't know what they'd been told. He didn't even know who their mother was. But he knew this. He wasn't leaving. Not until he got answers. Not until he knew the truth about what he might have done. Jonathan didn't remember standing up. But suddenly, he was at the counter near the kitchen, pretending to read the wine specials on the wall. From here, he could keep an eye on the boys without being obvious. His hands shook slightly. He shoved them in his jacket pockets. The waitress from earlier passed by, balancing 3 plates. He cleared his throat. "Hey," he said casually, "those 2 boys in the back booth, do they come in often?" She followed his glance, then shook her head. "Nope, it's the first time I've seen them. Why are they causing trouble?" Jonathan shook his head quickly. No, just curious." She gave him a polite smile and disappeared into the dining room again. So, they weren't regulars. They weren't just here for the food. They were here for him. He returned to his booth, but he couldn't sit still. The restaurant was still buzzing around him. Laughter, glasses clinking, waiters weaving between tables. But it all faded into background noise. All he could hear now were those boys. "I just want to know why," the boy in the hoodie said. "Why he did it. Mom never tells us the whole story." There was a pause. The one in the cap leaned forward. "What if it's not him?" "It's him," the other said firmly. "Mom showed me a picture. It's definitely him." Jonathan's stomach dropped. A picture of him. Who was their mother? What had she told them? He tried to dig into his memory. Faces, names, years. But there had been hundreds of employees over the decades. Talented people. Passionate people. People he'd worked alongside and people who'd quietly left. Had he missed someone? Or worse, had he forgotten someone? He couldn't sit in the shadows anymore. He had to face this. He stood, took a breath, and approached the booth. The 2 boys froze when they saw him. "Hey!" Jonathan said gently, keeping his hands in plain sight, his tone warm. "You 2 seem a little tense. Everything okay?" The boy in the hoodie straightened up, chin tight. "We're fine." Jonathan nodded. "All right, I just thought, I overheard you mentioning someone. Someone you were hoping to see. Are you looking for someone specific?" The boys glanced at each other. The younger one shifted uncomfortably. The older one didn't flinch. "Why do you care?" the hoodie boy asked, his voice sharp. Jonathan chose his words carefully. "Just thought maybe I could help. I might know them." The boy narrowed his eyes. Then something changed. His gaze locked onto Jonathan's face. His brows furrowed. "Wait," he said slowly. You look familiar." Jonathan froze. He tried to laugh it off. "I get that a lot. Must be the beard." "No," the boy said, his voice rising. "You're him. You're Jonathan Reeve." The second boy gasped, his face going pale. "Is it really him?" he whispered. There was no use denying it. "Yes," Jonathan said quietly. "I'm Jonathan Reeve. But how do you know who I am?" The boy in the hoodie, Zeke, didn't blink. "Because of what you did to our mom." Jonathan blinked. "Your mom?" he asked carefully. "You remember Melissa Grant?" Zeke snapped. The name hit Jonathan like a slap. Melissa. He remembered her now, vividly. Bright eyes, fast hands, endless ideas. She had once been his sous chef, creative, driven, and eager to prove herself. She had brought him a dozen ideas a week, each more daring than the last. Then she was gone. No warning, no goodbye. She worked here, right? Jonathan asked, voice low. She didn't just work here, Zeke said, voice full of heat. She helped build this place. She created the lemon ginger halibut, the citrus truffle risotto. She was the reason this restaurant meant something. And what did you do? Jonathan's mouth went dry. You stole her recipes, Zeke continued, took all the credit. And when she confronted you, you made sure no one else would hire her. Jonathan's breath caught. That's not true, he said. I mean, I didn't. She told us everything, Zeke said, cutting him off. You blacklisted her. She spent years trying to get back into the industry, but no one would even interview her. You erased her. The younger boy finally spoke. His voice was softer. She said you were scared of her success, that you couldn't handle someone else getting the spotlight. Jonathan stared at them, speechless. He thought back to those years, the chaos, the expansion, the interviews, the pressure. He'd been so focused on winning, on building a name, on perfecting every detail. Had he overlooked the people who helped him? Had he silenced them, intentionally or not? He didn't have answers, but he had something else. Resolve. I need to talk to your mom, Jonathan said quietly but firmly. If what you're saying is true, then I need to hear from her, face to face. Zeke hesitated. She's not here right now, he said, but if you really want to know the truth, you'll have to come see us. Jonathan nodded. Then I will. The rain had slowed to a quiet drizzle as Jonathan pulled up outside the apartment complex. It was an aging building in South Elridge, the kind of place with rusted stair rails and paint peeling from the trim. The sidewalk was cracked and patched in places with uneven concrete. A lone porch light flickered above the entrance. Jonathan sat in his car for a moment, watching the droplets slide down his windshield. His hands were still on the steering wheel, unmoving. What am I doing here? He asked himself, but he already knew he owed her this. A conversation, an explanation, maybe, just maybe, a path toward something better. He stepped out into the rain and made his way to the door. Before he could knock, it opened. Zeke stood there, hood down now, his face a little less guarded but still unreadable. You came, he said, not quite a question. Jonathan nodded. I said I would. Zeke stepped aside without a word. Jonathan entered the apartment. It was small but clean, modest. Family photos lined the hallway. Some new, some older, all filled with quiet memories. The scent of lavender drifted from a candle burning on a shelf. There was warmth here, not from money, but from effort, from care. He walked into the living room, and there she was. Melissa Grant sat on the edge of a worn gray couch, her body angled toward the glow of the television. The years had left their marks, fine lines around her eyes, streaks of silver in her auburn hair. But Jonathan recognized her instantly. The same quiet intensity, the same posture, the same presence. Her gaze landed on him. She didn't flinch. Jonathan Reeve, she said, her voice steady low. I can't say I expected to ever see you standing in my living room. Jonathan swallowed. Melissa, he began, his voice softer than it had ever been in front of her. I heard what the boys said. I need to know. Did I really hurt you that badly? She gave a hollow laugh, not cruel, just tired. You don't remember, do you? She said, folding her arms. Of course you don't. People like you never do. Jonathan stepped closer, not too close. I'm not here to argue, he said. I'm not here to make excuses. I don't remember doing anything that could have destroyed your life. Please, just tell me what happened. I want to understand. Melissa was quiet for a long moment. Then she leaned back, her eyes distant. You want the short version? She said. Fine, you took credit for my work. The dishes that made your restaurant famous, most of them were mine. I poured myself into that kitchen. I have given you my best ideas, my best flavors. I thought you were mentoring me. I thought we were building something together. She looked back at him now. Her eyes didn't burn, they ached. But when the interviews came, when the articles were printed, it was all you. Your name, your story, my food. Jonathan opened his mouth to respond, but Melissa held up a hand. I'm not finished. I confronted you, quietly, respectfully. I asked why you didn't mention me. You said it was just business. Said people only want one face for the brand. Then, suddenly, I wasn't invited to team meetings anymore. My schedule got cut. My name disappeared from the staff page. And when I left, no one would hire me. Her voice cracked, not with volume, but with where. I tried every kitchen in the city, every place that claimed to value creativity. I got silence, cold shoulders, a few polite rejections, and I knew why. Jonathan's heart was pounding now. Melissa, I didn't blacklist you, he said. I swear, I never told anyone not to hire you. She stared at him. Maybe not directly, she said, but your silence did it for you. No one wanted to cross the golden boy of Old Pine. You didn't need to say a word. The doors closed themselves. The room fell quiet. In the hallway, Zeke and Noah stood just out of sight listening. Jonathan lowered himself onto the edge of an armchair, slowly, carefully. I didn't know, he said. I didn't know it got that bad. I didn't know you were hurting. Melissa looked away. I went from designing dishes for award season to prepping freezer meals in the school cafeteria. You think that was easy to swallow? Jonathan shook his head. No, I don't. And I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking for a chance to make it right. Somehow, she didn't respond right away. Then, almost whispering, why now? Jonathan looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a CEO. He felt like a man trying to remember how to be decent. I went undercover because I felt disconnected, he said. But I didn't expect to find you, or your sons, or the story I left behind. He paused. You were brilliant, Melissa. You still are. And if I erase that, even by accident, then the only thing I can do now is try to bring it back. Melissa exhaled slowly. Her shoulders dropped, not in forgiveness, but in exhaustion. You can't bring back the years. No, Jonathan agreed, but maybe I can help build something new, something that finally gives you your name back. She didn't answer, but for the first time, she didn't push him away either. The next morning, Jonathan didn't go into his office. He didn't open his laptop, didn't check his emails, didn't review performance reports or supplier contracts. Instead, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at a blank notebook. For the first time in years, he wasn't building a brand. He was writing an apology, not with words, but with actions. He wrote Melissa's name at the top of the page. Underneath, one question: what does it look like to make this right? The list that followed wasn't long, but it was honest. Public credit, a real position, leadership, not a gesture. Control over her own food. Her story told the way it should have been told. By noon, he was on the phone with David Tran, a respected food journalist he'd known for 20 years. She was one of the most talented chefs I ever worked with, Jonathan said, and I failed her. There was a pause on the other end. Melissa Grant? David finally asked. I always wondered what happened to her. I happened, Jonathan replied, voice flat. He explained everything, not the PR version, the real version. David didn't interrupt. When Jonathan finished, David said, if you're serious about this, let's tell her story. Next came the call to HR. Then, he became the executive chef at the flagship location of Reeves Table. He didn't ask permission. He gave instructions. A new role was being created, Co-head chef, equal in title, equal in power. The creative direction of the menu would be split, his legacy and Melissa's vision side by side. He also made it clear her return was not a PR stunt. It was a reckoning. The next day, Melissa stood at the front entrance of Reeves' table for the first time in nearly 17 years. She wore a black coat, hair pulled back, hands tucked into her sleeves. Her sons flanked her, Zeke trying to look neutral, Noah looking curious. Jonathan met her outside, not in a suit, but in a simple gray sweater and jeans. He looked like a man, not a brand. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I almost didn't," Melissa replied. "I would have understood." The boys stayed by the door as Melissa followed Jonathan to the kitchen. It hadn't changed much. Sleek stainless steel surfaces, busy staff, smells that wrap around memory like ribbon. But something had changed, the way people looked at her. Word had already spread. And this time, no one looked past her. Jonathan led her to a quiet corner table in the back office, where a printed draft sat waiting. It was a press release that was already shared with local media. The headline, "Melissa Grant returns to Reeves' table as co-head chef, the creative force behind its most iconic dishes." Melissa read it in silence. When she finished, she looked up. "You wrote this?" Jonathan nodded. "I had help from David, but the words are mine." She blinked, slowly. "There's no mention of forgiveness, no spin." "No," he said, "because I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just trying to make sure the truth has your name on it now." He reached for another sheet beneath it, an offer letter, salary, title, full creative freedom, her name on the wall, her face is on the website, and a new menu collaboration, the Grand Collection. Melissa stared at it. Then she laughed, softly, but with real disbelief. 17 years, and now you offer me the keys to the kitchen." "No," Jonathan said gently. "I'm offering to share the kitchen, like I should have done all along." She didn't say yes, but she didn't walk away either. She looked at her hands for a long time. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she whispered. "You don't have to," Jonathan replied. "Just give me a chance to earn it." That evening, the team gathered in the staff lounge. Jonathan stood up and introduced Melissa, not as a returning employee, but as a partner. He didn't speak long, just enough for people to understand this wasn't about nostalgia. This was about integrity. Some staff members clapped. Some looked confused. A few looked uncomfortable. But Melissa stood tall. She didn't shrink. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain herself. Because this time, she didn't have to. In the following days, a quiet buzz grew across the city. Old customers remember her dishes. New ones wanted to taste them. Food blogs picked up the story. Culinary schools reposted her recipes. One paper titled its piece, "The Chef Who Disappeared and the Man Who Finally Told the Truth." And in every interview, Jonathan said the same thing. "I didn't give her anything. I'm just trying to return what I once took." By the end of the week, Melissa was back in the chef's coat. It fit differently now, loose around the shoulders, a little tighter at the sleeves, but the feeling of standing in that kitchen, flames roaring, pans clashing, spices blooming in oil, it came back like muscle memory. But not everything felt familiar. Some glances were warm, curious, even hopeful. Others, not so much. One morning, a line cook made a snide comment under his breath. She disappeared for years and suddenly walks in with a title. Another chef nodded, folding his arms. "I've been here 7 years. Never even been considered for creative lead." Melissa heard it. She didn't flinch, didn't snap back. She just plated the herb-crusted lamb and moved on. But Jonathan noticed. Later that evening, he found her prepping solo in the back kitchen. "I heard what Mark said," he offered. Melissa didn't look up. "You don't need to fight my battles." Jonathan shook his head. "No, but I need to understand them. And if there's resentment, it's my fault." And resentment did grow. Not loud, not violent, but slow, quiet, tight-lipped. Some staff whispered about favoritism. Some questioned why someone who walked away deserved a leadership seat. What they didn't realize was that she didn't walk away. She was pushed, and now that she was walking back in, she was walking uphill. The press attention didn't help. Every article painted Melissa as the hidden genius and Jonathan as the redeemed leader. But in the break room, it felt different. Some thought she was using the moment. Some thought he was using her story to polish his legacy. It was messy, because truth usually is. A week later, at a staff meeting, Melissa stood before the kitchen team. She held no notes, no prepared speech, just a simple truth. "I didn't come back here to steal the spotlight," she began. "I came back because I believe in what we started here, in what it can be, not just for me, but for any of you who've ever been told to wait your turn until it's too late." She paused. "I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here to build beside you, to cook beside you. And if you have something to say about me, I'd rather you say it to my face, so we can talk, not whisper." The room went quiet. Someone clapped, then another. Eventually, most of them did, but not all. Later that week, Jonathan was invited to speak at a culinary leadership forum. Instead of talking about innovation or strategy, he told the room a story about a woman named Melissa Grant, about the mistakes he made, about the years she lost, and about the industry's obsession with single names, single faces, single heroes, when greatness was always built by many hands. The video went viral. One clip in particular. Redemption isn't about headlines. It's about handing back the microphone you once took away. The backlash came too. A blog post accused Jonathan of emotional branding. A former manager tweeted that the whole thing was corporate repentance theater. But Jonathan didn't reply. Instead, he quietly sponsored a new culinary scholarship, not under his name, but Melissa's. He didn't even tell her. She found out when a young girl tagged her in a video, crying as she held her acceptance letter. And slowly, something shifted. Mark, the line cook, stopped muttering. He started asking Melissa for advice. A pastry chef named Rena began pitching ideas to her, one she'd been too afraid to share before. Melissa's presence became less of a question and more of a constant. And then came the Grand Collection, a new tasting menu she built entirely with her team. It launched on a Friday night, sold out by Saturday. By Monday, critics were calling it the soul of the season. But the most meaningful moment came from someone unexpected. That night, after service, Noah, her youngest, sat beside her on a bench outside the restaurant. "You know," he said quietly, "I never really understood why you left cooking." She looked at him, eyebrows raised. "You were too young to remember," she said. He nodded. "But now I see you here. And it's like, you're not just back in the kitchen." She tilted her head. "You're back in yourself." Melissa didn't cry, but something inside her softened. Because that was it. She hadn't returned for revenge. She'd returned for herself. And now, people could see her, finally, for who she'd always been. A month had passed. The new menu was thriving. The press had quieted. Inside the kitchen, things had settled into something rare and steady, mutual respect. But outside the walls of Reeves' table, something else was stirring. Melissa had started saying yes. Yes to interview requests. Yes to mentorship programs. Yes to a quiet idea that had been tugging at her sleeve for years. It started with Noah. He'd always been curious, watching her slice vegetables, asking about herbs, asking what umami meant like it was a riddle to solve. But now, something shifted. He began asking if he could cook with her, not just at home, but at the restaurant. He wasn't trying to be a chef. He just wanted to understand why his mother had once walked away from something she clearly loved, and why now she had walked right back in. On Thursday afternoons, after the last lunch rush had cleared and the kitchen was in reset mode, Melissa began hosting Open bench sessions. She'd leave a few stools by the prep counter. Invite anyone, interns, dishwashers, servers on break, to watch her work, ask questions, try their hand at plating. No sign-up sheets. No approval is needed, just presence. At first, only Noah showed up. Then Zeke did. Then 2 pastry assistants. Then a server named Leo said his mother always wanted to be a chef, but there wasn't room for women back then. Word spread. The sessions grew. Suddenly, Melissa wasn't just back in the kitchen. She was building something beyond the kitchen. A place where knowledge wasn't hoarded, where titles didn't gatekeep, where stories were passed down with spices and stories and laughter. Jonathan watched it unfold from the sidelines, half in awe, half in reflection. She wasn't doing what he once did, leading to be seen. She was doing what great leaders do, teaching without ego. One evening, Jonathan stepped into the open bench circle, not as CEO, just as Jonathan. He picked up a peeler and quietly joined the rhythm. Melissa glanced over, but didn't say anything. She just nodded once, and that was enough. Later, as they cleaned up, Jonathan asked her, "Have you thought about teaching officially? Like opening a school?" Melissa chuckled. "You offering to fund it?" He smiled. "No PR strings. No name on the building. Just say the word." She didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "Let's start with one student at a time." That one student came sooner than expected. Her name was Elena, 16, quiet, serious, with sleeves always pulled over her hands. She had been living at a youth shelter nearby. A volunteer had seen her sketching meals in a notebook, complete with ingredients, plating, and even notes on temperature. That same volunteer had also read an article, "The Woman Who Came Back," Melissa Grant and the Power of Returning. And just like that, one door opened. Elena was brought to the restaurant. She didn't talk much, didn't want special treatment, just wanted to stand in the back and watch. Melissa let her. No questions, no expectations, just space. A week later, Elena whispered, "I want to learn the lemon ginger halibut." Melissa froze. That was her dish, the one she never saw her name next to. And here was again being asked for, not because it was trending, but because someone felt it. She smiled. "All right, we start with the marinade." Jonathan watched all this quietly. He didn't step in, didn't take credit, didn't even introduce himself. He just observed. And in the quiet of that moment, Melissa teaching, Elena listening, Noah scribbling notes beside them, he realized this wasn't about fixing the past anymore. This was about building the future. A future where no one had to disappear in order for someone else to shine. A few days later, a package arrived from Melissa. Inside, a framed certificate. Melissa Grant Culinary Scholarship. Fully funded. Created quietly by Jonathan. Administered through a foundation. No press release. No launch event. Just a note. For the ones who need a second chance before they ever get a first. Melissa hung it in the hallway near the back kitchen, next to an old photo of her in her first chef's coat, barely 25. She didn't make a speech. She didn't post about it. But when Elena saw it, her face changed. Like maybe the world wasn't built entirely against her. It was a slow Sunday evening. The dinner rush hadn't started yet. The air smelled of rosemary, garlic, and quiet expectation. Jonathan stood in the far corner of the kitchen, tying his apron. He wasn't scheduled to cook. He wasn't there for press or for photos. He was there because Melissa had invited him. "Open bench tonight," she had said simply, "and we got a guest chef. Thought you might want to peel some carrots next to her." The guest chef was Elena, wearing a crisp new apron. No logo, no title, just her name, hand-stitched in soft gray thread. She moved with quiet purpose, checking ingredients, triple measuring lemon zest like it was gold dust. Beside her stood Noah, reading the recipe out loud carefully, like every word mattered. At the far edge of the counter, Zeke, skeptical as always, arms crossed but present. He didn't say much, but he hadn't missed a single Sunday since Melissa returned. Melissa herself stood at the center, half conductor, half mother, all fire. They were preparing the halibut, the same dish that once launched a restaurant and buried a name. But tonight, it wasn't about who invented it. It was about who was learning it now, about who would carry it forward. Jonathan peeled carrots in silence. He wasn't needed, and yet somehow he belonged. At one point, Elena looked up from the saucepan and asked, "Chef Melissa, can I try plating it my way?" Melissa paused for half a second, then smiled. "Show me." The plate that emerged wasn't traditional. It was bold, abstract, fragments of flavor arranged like brushstrokes. Elena stepped back, nervous. Zeke raised an eyebrow. Noah grinned. Melissa looked at it for a long moment, then nodded. "You just made it yours." Elena's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. She just whispered, "Thank you." Later that night, they all sat together in the dining room. No customers, no lights but the overheads. Just a group of people, once strangers, once wounded, sharing plates of food and stories. Jonathan looked across the table at Melissa. "You rebuilt something I didn't even realize I broke," he said. She didn't argue, but her voice was softer than it had ever been. "You didn't break it all, Jonathan. You just forgot to protect it." He nodded, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fix the past, just to show up now. Zeke raised a glass, not wine, just water, and cleared his throat. "To second chances," he said, awkward but sincere. "And third ones, too." They all laughed, even Melissa, even Jonathan. And in that quiet laughter, in that room with no audience, something clicked. Redemption had nothing to do with applause. It had to do with staying at the table when it got uncomfortable, owning what went wrong, with sharing what was rightfully others, with building spaces where more than one person could shine. Over the next few months, the Grand Collection expanded into its own seasonal series. Elena was officially apprenticing under Melissa. Noah wrote a blog post that went viral. My mom's name is back on the menu. Zeke started a community garden behind the restaurant, growing herbs that Melissa now used in her sauces. Jonathan, he started talking less and listening more. He still led, still built, still dreamed, but this time with others. One day, as a staff prep for dinner, Elena walked up to Jonathan. "I heard you used to go undercover here," she said, eyes teasing. He smiled. "Yeah, I thought it was the only way to see the truth." She nodded, thoughtful. "You know, you didn't have to hide. You just had to show up." He blinked, then laughed. "That's probably the real lesson, huh?" Elena shrugged. "I don't know. I'm still learning." "Aren't we all?" he said. That night, the tables filled with customers. The buzz returned, the clinking, the laughter, and somewhere between the heat of the kitchen and the light of the dining room, a quiet truth simmered. You can't undo the past, but you can choose how to live with it. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the people you once hurt might teach you how to be better, not by demanding anything, but by inviting you to cook again, together,